Let's talk about the brain, and let's explore this really fascinating idea. What if the way we use our minds, not just now but over our entire lives, could actually build up a powerful defense against Alzheimer's disease?
So here's the big question. Could a lifelong habit really cut your risk by nearly 40%? I know that number sounds huge, but it comes from a major new study that suggests keeping our minds active might be one of the best things we can do for our brain health. So how on earth does that work?
Well, imagine your brain is like an incredibly complex puzzle. Every time you learn something new, solve a problem, or even just read a book, you're adding another piece to it. Over a lifetime, you build this rich, detailed picture, what scientists call a cognitive reserve. And today, we're going to unpack a brand new study to see exactly how building this mental puzzle might just protect our brains in the long run.
Okay, so let's get into the investigation. To really understand this link between a curious life and a healthier brain, researchers had to get into the details.
So the evidence here comes from a really solid study published in Neurology, which is the journal of the American Academy of Neurology. And get this, they followed almost 2,000 adults, all starting around age 80, for nearly a decade. They were just tracking their activities and their health, looking for a pattern.
The key thing they were trying to measure is this idea of cognitive enrichment. And it's actually a pretty simple concept. It's just a grand total of all the mentally stimulating things you do and the environments you're in across your entire life.
But to really get the full picture, you can't just look at what people are doing in their 80s, right? You need clues from their entire life story. So let's see how they pieced it all together. They broke everyone's life down into 3 main stages. Early life, so before age 18, then middle age, right around 40 years old, and finally, later life, which was when the study began. This gave them a kind of timeline of each person's mental engagement.
So for early life, they looked for clues that sparked that initial curiosity. You know, things like, were you read to as a kid? Did you have books and newspapers lying around the house? Did you study a language? Little things that build that foundation. Then, jumping to middle age, the clues changed a bit. It was more about how you maintained that curiosity. Did you have a library card and actually use it? Did you go to museums? Did you have magazines or dictionaries around to look things up? And in later life, it was all about that continued active engagement. Things like reading, writing letters or in a journal, and playing games like cards, board games, or doing puzzles. It really shows that keeping your mind sharp is a lifelong project.
So, after gathering all of this data over all those years, the researchers finally put it all together. And what they discovered, well, it was pretty incredible.
What they did was they focused on the 2 extremes. They looked at the top 10% of people who had the most enriched lives, and they compared them to the bottom 10% who had the least. And this is where the differences just became so clear.
Okay, now check out these numbers. In that group with the lowest mental stimulation, 34%, that's more than a third developed Alzheimer's during the study. But in the highest enrichment group, only 21%. That is a massive difference.
And when the scientists balanced everything out, factoring in things like age and sex, that difference translated into this single headline-grabbing number, a 38% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, just from living a more mentally active life. But it gets even better. It wasn't just about if they developed the disease, it was also about when. For those in the high enrichment group who did eventually develop Alzheimer's, their symptoms showed up, on average, 5 years later. That's 5 more years of healthy brain function.
And the effect was even more dramatic for something called mild cognitive impairment, which is often a precursor to full-blown dementia. For that, the delay was a full 7 years. This is a perfect example of that cognitive reserve we talked about, that puzzle acting like a protective buffer.
So, after looking at all this evidence, what's the big takeaway here? What does this actually mean for you and for me in our everyday lives? Okay, this is a really crucial point the researchers make. This study shows a powerful connection and association, not a direct cause and effect. So living a curious, engaged life doesn't mean it's impossible to get Alzheimer's, but it is strongly linked to a much lower risk.
And the implications here go way beyond just what we do as individuals. As one of the study's authors, Dr. Andrea Zamet, points out, this suggests that public investments in things that give everyone access to enrichment, like libraries, museums, and good schools, could actually be a major public health strategy for reducing dementia.
And maybe the most amazing finding of all came from the autopsies of participants after they passed away. They found that even when people's brains had the physical hallmarks of Alzheimer's, those amyloid and tau proteins, the ones with the most lifelong enrichment still had better memory and thinking skills. It was like their cognitive reserve was actively fighting back against the disease.
So this research really isn't just data, is it? It's kind of a call to action. It suggests that every book you read, every new hobby you pick up, every little puzzle you solve, you're adding one more piece to that mental puzzle of yours. So I guess that just leaves one question. What new skill are you going to learn next?